I want to ask you something before we get started. Have you ever said no to work and felt it? It doesn't feel like the slow, apologetic version where you spend 3 paragraphs explaining why before you get to the actual answer. The clean, clear, intentional no. The one that came from a place of genuine assessment rather than exhaustion or avoidance. And it came to you fast, and it came out before you could control it. No, we can't make those changes at this point. Or no, that's out of scope. If you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a split second after it leaves your mouth where something unusual happens. It's a rush of energy, something that feels almost forbidden. Like you just did something that wasn't on the approved list of professional behaviors. And then, almost immediately, the second wave hits, the panic, that second guessing. What if I was wrong? What if they think I'm difficult? What if this costs me something I can't afford to lose right now? Most people feel that sequence and interpret it as a mistake. You made a mistake. They walk it back. They add qualifications. They try to reverse engineer back to yes, because yes feels right and no feels wrong. But this isn't a mistake. This is a signal, and your nervous system in a professional work environment has been functioning for years of automatic yes. And in that no moment, it may have felt like a glitch in the matrix. In reality, it was a deliberate leadership judgment, a conscious choice, and your brain hasn't learned that yet, so it calls it dangerous. It isn't. Here's the thing. The most expensive professional mistake most senior leaders make isn't saying yes to the wrong thing. It's never understanding that no was an option at all. And that's what we're talking about today. I'm Christina Holloway. For over 25 years, I've coached senior leaders at organizations like Google, GE, and Spotify to architect their authority and navigate the high-stakes politics of the Fortune 500. On this channel, I show you how to recognize the power plays hiding in plain sight and how to communicate with a presence that demands a seat at the table. This is the first video in my August Strategic Leader series. And I'm starting here with the most underrated leadership skill most high performers forget to develop, because everything else we're going to cover this month builds on it. The ability to make a clear, grounded, strategic judgment call about what you will and will not take on, and to communicate that judgment with real, genuine authority, your authority. Most content about saying no treats it as a self-care practice. I've done that too. A stress management tool, a way to protect your energy and preserve your well-being. I need to learn how to say no to taking on too much work. That's incomplete. At the senior level, saying no is not a boundary-setting tactic. We want to look at it as a strategic leadership function. And learning to exercise it deliberately and clearly and without apologizing, don't apologize, is one of the clearest indicators that you have crossed over from excellent execution into genuine leadership authority. It's very exciting. All right, so let's get started. Let's start here. Understanding why the automatic yes happens is the first step toward interrupting it. Most high performers don't say yes because they're pushovers. They don't say yes because they can't think for themselves or because they've never considered pushback. They say yes because the professional environment they operate in has been specifically designed through hierarchy, culture, and years of feedback to make yes feel like the correct answer and no feel like a character flaw. Think about how corporate hierarchies actually work. There is a person above you. That person has a title. That title carries implied authority. It's the authority to assign work, set direction, and evaluate performance. And from the moment you get hired into most organizations, the message you receive, explicitly or not, is that respecting that authority means accepting that direction, that a good professional executes what's asked of them, that questions are appropriate, but resistance is not. Okay, so here's what that message leaves out. The person above you is a person. Some of them know exactly what they're doing. Some of them are figuring it out as they go, winging it more than they would ever admit until they figure it out. And some of them, the third group, the one nobody talks about openly, but everyone talks about secretly, are operating from ego, insecurity, or something more off balance than that. They're making decisions based on politics, self-protection, a broken sense of self, or pressures that have nothing to do with what's actually best for the work. All three of those bosses carry the same title. All three have the same organizational authority. And we have either been trained or just want to believe that we can respond to all three of those people as though they are operating with accurate information and good judgment. They are not. Deference to authority is not a professional requirement, but it can turn into a professional habit. And like every habit we've talked about this year, it runs on autopilot until something interrupts it. But here's where it gets more nuanced, because the problem isn't just that we defer too much. It's that at a certain level of seniority, director, senior director, vice president, chief of staff, deference is no longer a reasonable default, and it starts being a strategic liability. And most professionals at that level have never been told that. So here's what I mean. You are an individual contributor or in a management role. Your job is execution. You receive direction, you produce excellent work, and the quality of that work is your primary contribution. Yes is almost always the right answer because your value lives in your output. But at the senior level, something shifts. Your value is no longer primarily in your output, it's in your judgment, your ability to assess a situation clearly, to see what's viable and what isn't, to bring your expertise to bear on a decision before it becomes a problem, to tell the people above you what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, because that perspective is what makes you strategically indispensable. And that function, the assessment function, the judgment function, the let me tell you what I'm actually seeing here function, requires the ability to say no, or at a minimum, not yet, or more precisely, here's what I'm observing and here's what I recommend before we commit to this. The problem is that most professionals arrive at the senior level having spent a decade or more being rewarded for execution, so for saying yes, for making it work regardless of the conditions, and nobody sat them down and said, the rules have changed. Your job now includes evaluation. It includes pushback. It includes the clear, grounded, professionally delivered no. So they keep doing what worked before. They take the assignment. They try to make it work. They absorb the problems. They tell the boss it's challenging when what they mean is, this was set up to fail, and I don't know how to say that. That's not a failure of character. That is a failure of information. They don't know no is an option. So let me tell you about a time I got this completely wrong. I was an acting chief of staff to the executive director at a major tech consulting company, 18 years with that organization, 5 years as an employee, and then 13 as an external consultant. I knew the culture, I knew the methodology, I knew how to deliver results in that environment. I was deeply embedded in that business. My boss came to me with an assignment that felt, at the time like an opportunity. She wanted me to look at one of her cross-functional teams, a group that didn't report to her directly, but their deliverables were important to our work, and assess why their deliverables were consistently problematic. She thought I would be good at it, and she trusted me with it, and I said yes without a second thought. And that was the first mistake, and I didn't see it until much later. And here's what I walked into. This cross-functional team didn't answer to my boss, which meant they had no organizational obligation to adopt our methodology or follow our process or prioritize the improvements I was there to identify. They weren't waiting for someone to come in and fix their workflow. They thought they were doing fine. And when I arrived with frameworks and efficiency recommendations and a genuine belief that what I was offering would make their work better, they actually looked at me and saw a contractor who could help them with odd assignments. That was a giant red flag, and I should have addressed it immediately, and I didn't. I couldn't get alignment on anything. What was the approach? What was the timeline? Who was responsible for what? Every process improvement I proposed got sidelined or outright ignored. So I tried to make it work. It is very easy to get tunnel vision, which is why I always say it's important to slow down. I built workarounds. I found the smallest possible point of agreement and tried to construct something functional on top of that. I showed up to every meeting. I followed up on every commitment. I kept moving forward. And when my boss asked me how it was going, I told her it was challenging. That's it, challenging. I didn't tell her this assignment is structurally broken, or we're going to struggle with success here, or I need to debrief you on what I'm actually seeing because I think we need to make a decision about whether to continue. All I said was, it's challenging, and I kept going. What I should have done within the first month, possibly even the first 2 weeks, was step back from the assignment entirely and prepare a clear assessment for my boss. Here's what I found when I walked into this engagement. Here's the authority structure as it actually exists versus how we assumed it would work. Here are the specific conditions that would need to be true for this to succeed. Here's my recommendation for how to proceed or whether to proceed at all. That recommendation would have been the most valuable thing I contributed to that entire engagement, more valuable than any process improvement I implemented, more valuable than building a methodology for a team that had no real reason to use it. Instead, I took it on as a challenge for months until the whole thing collapsed anyway. The cross-functional lead was fired. His replacement refused to use our methodology. Another lead left, and a member of my boss's own team who had been complaining about the workload was completely removed. All of that happened eventually. It didn't happen all at once, but I can say in hindsight, we had good intentions, but it was the wrong environment. And honestly, I had the authority. I had the expertise. I had 18 years of institutional knowledge and a boss who trusted my judgment explicitly. And it never once crossed my mind that my job in that engagement included the option to say, this isn't viable, and here's why. That's what execution tunnel vision looks like. This is what the automatic yes costs at the senior level. It costs your time and energy. It also costs the strategic contribution you were actually there to make, the judgment that might have saved months of organizational turbulence. And again, reflecting on it, I didn't withhold my point of view because I was incapable of it. I withheld it because I didn't know it was part of the job. So, what does it actually look like to exercise this judgment deliberately? Because you might be thinking, well, just like you, Christina, how do we know when we're in it? I want to give you 3 scenarios, specific situations that professionals at the director level and above encounter regularly, and the moves that turn an automatic yes into a strategic leadership contribution. So if you run into these scenarios, you can practice the strategic no until it feels comfortable. Scenario number 1, no to a misaligned assignment from your boss. This is the scenario I just described. An assignment that feels like an opportunity that comes with implicit expectations of enthusiastic acceptance and that has structural problems that haven't fully surfaced yet. The move is not to refuse. The move is to assess before you commit and to make that assessment visible. Before you accept any significant assignment, you are entitled and at the senior level obligated to understand the conditions under which it can succeed. Who had authority over the relevant parties? What resources are available? What the definition of success actually is and who is measuring it? Whether the timeline is realistic given what you know about the environment. I had a client who did this. He said no repeatedly to a bad assignment and gave his reasons until they modified the assignment enough for him to feel comfortable. Yes, he had authority to do that, but he also understood he had that authority. He was the executive director telling the president of the company, no, this will not work this way. If the answer to those questions reveal a structural problem, your job is to name it, not as a complaint, but as a professional assessment delivered in service of a better outcome. The language that works? I want to make sure we set this up for success. Before I commit fully, I'd like to walk you through a few things I'm seeing that I think we should address. Can we take 20 minutes? That's exactly what a strategic leader does. And if your boss responds to the conversation by saying, yes, I see the issue. Let's adjust. You have just made yourself indispensable. If the answer is, I hear you, but I need you to proceed anyway, you have the information you need to proceed with clear eyes rather than blind optimism and frequent check-ins. Either way, you are operating from your intentional judgment rather than blind habit. Scenario number 2, no to scope creep from a peer or cross-functional partner. This one is more insidious than the boss scenario because it often doesn't feel like a decision point. It feels like a reasonable extension of something already in motion. One more request, one more addition to the deliverable, one more thing that would be really helpful if you could just, And because each individual ask seems reasonable, and because the relationship feels collaborative, and because you don't want to be the person who makes things difficult, you go along and go along again until what you agree to and what you're actually doing have almost nothing to do with each other. At the senior level, naming scope creep early is not being difficult. It's keeping the work viable. It's protecting your ability to deliver on the original commitment. And it's modeling clear professional communication that actually makes cross-functional relationships stronger over time instead of resentful. The language that works? I want to make sure we stay aligned on what this engagement covers. What you're describing goes beyond what we originally scoped, and I want to have a specific conversation about that before it becomes an assumption. Can we talk through what this would actually require in terms of time and resources? Note what this language does not include. It does not apologize. Do not apologize. It does not over-explain. It does not frame the scope creep as the other person's fault. It simply names the reality of the situation and opens a conversation about how to proceed. That's the move. Scenario number 3, pushback to leadership on a directive that won't work. This is the most senior scenario and the one that requires the most precision because the stakes are highest and the instinct to defer is strongest. Here's the thing about pushing back to leadership. Most professionals think of it as a confrontation, a challenge to authority, a risk to the relationship. And so they don't do it, or they do it badly, or in the wrong moment, or without the right framing. And that confirms every fear they had about how it would play out. But pushback delivered correctly is not a confrontation. You are bringing your expertise and your judgment to bear on a decision before it becomes a problem, which is precisely what a strategic leader is there to do. And this is the specific moment where I didn't do it. The key is specificity. Vague discomfort is not useful to a leadership team. A clear, grounded, evidence-based observation delivered without emotion, do the best you can, and with an explicit offer to help, think it through, is one of the most valuable things you can bring to a high-stakes conversation. The language that works? I want to make sure I'm fully supporting what you're trying to accomplish here. Based on what I know about this situation, specifically what I'm seeing with the team dynamics and the timeline, I think there's a risk we should talk through before we finalize this approach. Would it be useful if I put together a quick assessment? I can have something to you by the end of the week. 3 things that language does simultaneously. It signals alignment with the goal rather than resistance to the direction. It grounds the concern in specific observable evidence rather than general unease. And it offers a constructive next step that keeps you in the role of solution architect rather than obstacle. That last part matters enormously. At the senior level, you are not just entitled to pushback, you are expected to offer a path forward alongside it. That's what distinguishes strategic pushback from simple resistance. Here's what connects all 3 scenarios. In none of them are you saying no as a refusal. You are saying no as a reframe. You are redirecting the conversation toward a clear, more strategically grounded version of yes. A yes that accounts for what you actually know, what you have genuinely assessed, and what your professional perspective tells you about the path forward. This is the difference between a boundary and a leadership move. And it's a shift that makes the strategic no one of the most powerful signals of executive authority available to you. Okay, so here's what I want you to take from today. The automatic yes is not a personality trait, it's a habit that developed because it worked, because it was rewarded, and because nobody ever sat you down and told you that at a certain level of seniority, that will work against you. Your job is no longer just to execute what's asked of you. Your job is to assess whether what's being asked of you is the right thing, and to say so clearly when the answer is complicated. That assessment function, that judgment function, that willingness to bring what you actually know to bear on a decision before it becomes a problem is strategic leadership. And it requires the ability to say no or not yet as a contribution. Looking back on that cross-functional project, I realized I let my respect for my boss's authority quiet my own strategic judgment. She liked me. She gave me a lot of authority, and she listened to what I had to say, but I played it safe, and in hindsight, I can see now where she really liked the collaborative element of our work, but I didn't give her that as much as the execution. I spent a lot of my time trying to prove myself in the wrong direction. And if I could go back, I would do things much differently to strengthen that working relationship. Saying no is part of the job. It has always been part of the job. And now you know. All right, so that's it for my video on why saying no is actually a pretty strategic move. If today resonated with you, if you recognized yourself in the automatic yes, or if you have a version of that cross-functional story somewhere in your own professional history, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me about the assignment you should have pushed back on, because naming it out loud is always the first step toward doing it differently next time. My free communication toolkit is linked in the description below, and the Hogan Leadership Blueprint is linked there as well. On a final note, the next time an assignment lands on your desk and you have a strong urge to say yes, take a pause just for a moment and ask yourself one question. Do I know that this is viable, or am I just assuming that because someone above me asked for it? Sit with that and then take action. I'm Christina Holloway. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.